Wow, you guys really brought us an interesting one to dig into this, a complete YouTube transcript detailing a hypnotic regression.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
shall we unpack this hypnotic regression?
Let's do it.
Okay, so our mission today is to navigate Claudia's narrative. It's intensely personal. She recounts alleged UFO encounters, some really strange events that happened inside her own home, and then interactions with beings, most notably one who identifies as Ashtar Sheran.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting here is we're looking at a first-hand account delivered under hypnosis, right?
Mm.
And so for anybody who doesn't know much about it, hypnotic regression is a technique that's used to try and access memories or experiences that are maybe below the surface of our everyday awareness.
Right.
And it is worth noting that memories retrieved this way can be influenced by suggestion, or
Sure.
they may not be factual in the same way we understand everyday events.
Right.
However, the sheer amount of detail that Claudia provides and the consistency we see in her account during the regression really gives us a lot to think about.
Yeah, it's a lot of detail. It's
Yeah.
really fascinating. So it's not just like, a fleeting glimpse of something odd in the sky.
Right.
She describes a UFO encounter right in her bedroom
Right in her bedroom. Wow.
while she was watching a movie with her partner, Martin.
Okay.
And she says it was spherical white with these colors like orange, red, and yellow swirling around inside.
Wow.
And get this, she clearly saw a mandala-like drawing within it.
Okay.
It was small, just there for a few seconds, and then just as suddenly as it appeared, gone, vanished.
Yeah, it's really interesting how it starts with this sighting of a spherical or orb-like UFO,
Uh-huh.
which aligns with a lot of accounts we see, in more recent times.
Sure.
The detail about the internal collage, particularly the mandala symbol,
Yeah.
that's very unusual.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard that before.
Not something you usually hear in typical UFO stories, right? And, the appearance of mandala-like imagery is often associated with altered states of consciousness.
Right.
It can represent this subconscious attempt to find order or wholeness.
Right.
And its presence here could be a key into Claudia's, inner experience during this alleged encounter.
Absolutely. And that was just the start. So about 2 years before the UFO, when she was at Martin's house,
Okay.
she saw this tiny little illuminated door right below the keyhole of a regular-sized door.
What?
I know.
That's wild.
She describes it as small and glowing just there for about a minute before it simply faded away. What do you think about that?
That really raises some questions about perception and what we consider reality, right? I mean, was it an optical illusion? Was it a trick of the light? Or, as we find out later in the regression, was it something that Ashtar actually claimed responsibility for?
Yeah.
Calling it a sacred door to Sirius. But the timing of this event, right, it comes before the more direct UFO sighting that
Right.
can be interpreted in different ways.
Yeah.
Perhaps it was this initial unusual event that sort of set the stage for these later experiences, or maybe it only took on significance after these other events had already happened. In retrospect.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, so then roughly 2 months before the regression session,
Okay.
she has an encounter with a being with a square face.
Yeah.
And this is at her daughter's house.
Okay.
And she describes it as having a broad, smallish body, 2 arms, and this very distinct, drawn-like smile.
Wow.
And it was just looking at her in broad daylight and then vanished when she moved back, a distinctly square face. That's not a common description, is it?
No, not really. I mean, descriptions of alleged extraterrestrial beings, often they tend to be, more humanoid, but with variations in features like skin color, eyes, size, head shape. But a distinctly square face, that's unusual.
Yeah.
And this brief encounter clearly had an effect on Claudia.
Yeah.
And the fact that Ashtar later dismisses this being as a harmful being from Jupiter,
Yeah.
that's another thing we're going to want to keep in mind.
Right, yeah. And then there's this recurring water curtain vision.
Okay.
So this image of a watery curtain appearing in front of a large window has happened twice. The day before her first grandchild was born, and then again very recently, like last Tuesday. And she says it's fleeting. It disappears as soon as she turns her head. And she had this feeling that it was connected to her first grandchild's amniotic fluid issue,
Okay.
and wonders if it might relate to her current pregnancy.
Interesting.
It's like these visual phenomena are connected to these significant personal moments in her life.
Yeah, that's a really insightful observation, I think. The connection to these moments of new life, right?
Yeah.
A birth and then a current pregnancy.
Yeah.
It really suggests that there's a deep personal and potentially symbolic meaning here for Claudia.
Right.
And the water imagery, as she perceived it, it could be linked to the amniotic fluid, but, also more broadly to these themes of creation transition. Or even, what some people might describe as a veil between different states of being.
Right. Okay, so those are the events leading up to the regression.
Okay.
So now let's get into the hypnotic session itself.
Okay.
This is where Claudia actually revisits that UFO encounter, and she recalls communicating with two beings inside who identify as elder brothers.
Elder brothers.
Yeah.
Okay.
They were tall, around 2 meters, looked identical, and were wearing white tunics and appeared muscular. Interestingly, she perceived them as male.
Okay.
And one of them had that same manala symbol on the left chest of his tunic.
Okay.
So this elder brothers motif, I mean, is that something that you see a lot?
It is something that we see across a lot of New Age and contactee narratives.
Okay.
And it often implies this kind of benevolent or guiding role.
Right.
The physical description, these tall figures in white robes, it does tend to create a sense of otherworldliness.
Sure.
And then that mandala symbol clearly being like a key identifier for the being that introduces himself as Ashtar.
Right. Ashtar pronounced just like it's spelled.
Exactly.
And then the other being was Ashtar, who seemed to be Ashtar's assistant or right-hand man.
Okay.
Not really having any independent power of his own in their interaction. And Ashtar was described as having a peaceful and tranquil demeanor with shoulder-length blonde hair, light blue eyes, and fair skin.
Okay.
So he claimed that he had always been with Claudia and Martin, even before their birth,
Wow.
and that they both originated from the star Sirius. He called them incarnated souls.
The connection to Sirius is another recurring theme that we see in certain, spiritual and UFO belief systems.
Okay.
And Sirius is often portrayed as this highly evolved star system.
Right.
Ashtar's claim of a constant presence and the idea that souls are originating from a distant star. I mean, it really takes the narrative beyond just, a simple account of a strange aerial phenomenon.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So according to Ashtar, their mission on Earth is to help humanity transcend
Okay.
by promoting peace, karma cleansing, and care for the environment.
Okay.
And Claudia and Martin's role in all this is to teach what he calls transmutation
Transmutation.
through communication with people who are receptive to their message. So the idea is that this process of changed thinking and feeling ultimately leads to liberation upon physical death and a return to their Syrian origins.
Right.
And the reason for their visit in the bedroom.
Yeah, why were they there?
Ashtar said that it was to recharge Claudia and Martin's energy because they become so exhausted on Earth.
I see.
And that this recharge was delivered via a light beam from a ship above their house.
Interesting.
It's quite a narrative, isn't it?
It really presents a very specific and somewhat recognizable framework. We see this cosmic mission, the spiritual evolution,
Right.
and the concept of extraterrestrial assistance.
Yeah.
The idea of, energy recharging through a beam of light. It's a recurring motif in contact narratives as well.
Sure.
And it's interesting that Ashtar positions Claudia and Martin as like active participants in this mission, not just as, passive observers.
Right. Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. So Claudia asks Ashtar about that illuminated miniature door that she saw.
Right.
And he confirms that it was him,
It was him.
calling it a sacred door to Sirius and saying that it's always available for her spirit to travel through,
Wow.
even while she's physically here.
I see.
So naturally, while under hypnosis, Claudia describes taking a journey to this crystal city on Sirius.
A crystal city.
Yeah. She says it felt ice-like but not cold. And it was populated by these tranquil beings wearing white tunics who communicate telepathically. And had a very peaceful atmosphere. But apparently Ashtar doesn't reside there.
He doesn't live there.
He doesn't live there.
Interesting.
He's described as a superior being who lives in a separate city.
Okay.
This one's like verdant, filled with unique flowers and maintained by its inhabitants. And there are no houses, rooms, or money.
So like a utopia of sorts.
Right.
Huh.
Quite a contrast to our everyday experiences.
Yeah, I mean, the Crystal City archetype is often associated with higher dimensions or spiritual realms.
Okay.
Places that are characterized by purity, serenity, and advanced consciousness. And the distinction that Ashtar makes between this Crystal City and his own residence, it kind of introduces this hierarchy, right, within this Syrian civilization, as he describes it.
Yeah.
The lack of material possessions in Ashtar's verdant city
Right?
aligns with, these common notions of these advanced spiritual societies
Sure.
that have moved beyond, such concerns.
Right. Okay, so remember that square face being that Claudia saw?
Yes.
She asks Ashtar about it,
Uh-huh.
and he denies knowing it.
He doesn't know it.
He says it's a harmful being
Uh-huh.
from Jupiter, doesn't have a name, and that it was just there to steal Claudia's energy just by being close to her.
Just by proximity.
Wow. Apparently, it vibrates at a higher frequency of 5
Okay.
compared to Claudia's 3 when it was near, although her natural frequency is supposedly an 8.
Okay, so there's different frequencies at play.
Right. And Ashtar vibrates at an 18.
18, wow.
Ashtar's at a 10. And when Ashtar gives her that light beam energy, her vibration supposedly goes up to 8.
So it's this whole energetic dynamic thing.
Right. It's very interesting. So it's interesting how the narrative brings in this idea of vibrational frequencies,
Yeah.
which is a concept that's really popular in some New Age spiritual beliefs
Right.
that suggests, different states of being resonate at different energetic levels. And while this isn't scientifically established,
Yeah.
it's a framework that Claudia seems to have accessed during her regression.
Right. It's this idea that, like different radio frequencies,
Right.
different states of consciousness resonate at different stations.
Mhm.
And the idea of a negative entity draining energy just by being close,
Yeah.
that's a recurring theme that we see in paranormal beliefs too.
Right.
And then Ashtar's higher vibration and this concept of energetic recharging, it provides an explanation, at least within this framework, for why he's interacting with Claudia in this way.
Right. But here's where things get really kind of contradictory.
Okay.
So Claudia mentions that she was able to raise her own vibration significantly to 15, then 25, and even 32.
Mm.
She says that at these higher levels, she felt wonderful, like a being of light.
Okay.
And here's the interesting part. She perceived Ashtar as being less powerful than her at these higher frequencies.
Really?
And he didn't seem happy about it at all. He's quoted as saying, "We cannot elevate so high," but without giving any explanation as to why.
Interesting.
But despite this apparent limitation, he still insists that he is the supreme being.
That seems a little contradictory.
Right.
If he's limited by her higher vibration, then how can he be supreme?
Right.
So what does that suggest about the nature of his power, or at least Claudia's perception of it?
Exactly. And it gets even more unsettling
Oh, no.
because Ashtar then accuses Claudia of removing chips from people.
Chips.
Yeah. And he says he doesn't like this at all.
Why not?
Well, because he wants to keep people within a certain frequency range, preventing them from realizing what he calls the veil of Isis.
Oh, wow. The veil of Isis. That's...
For anyone who doesn't know, the veil of Isis is this ancient concept that's often associated with hidden knowledge or the illusion of the material world.
Right.
And in this context, Ashtar seems to be suggesting that he is deliberately keeping people from seeing beyond this perceived illusion.
I see.
He wants people to believe only in him, keeping them limited without their awareness. So all those messages of peace that are supposedly online, signed by Ashtar,
Right.
he claims that they were just a tactic to keep people submissive by promoting high vibrations. And this promise of, a future connection, while the reality, according to this regression, is quite different.
Right.
He even talks about these chips or implants that he says are placed in different parts of people's bodies.
Wow. This definitely casts Ashtar in like a more negative light.
Yeah.
This idea of manipulating humanity through seemingly positive messages, implanting energetic or even physical chips for control, it's a recurring theme that we see in various conspiracy theories, narratives about deceptive extraterrestrial beings. Ashtar's explanation about, wanting to keep people behind the veil of Isis, it really suggests a deliberate effort to keep people in a certain level of ignorance.
Right.
Or limited perception.
Yeah, and he even makes this ominous claim: for every 2 people Claudia helps,
Yeah.
he will implant 4 more.
Oh, wow.
And while he refers to himself as a commander,
Right.
he dismisses it as a meaningless title that doesn't come with true freedom.
Okay.
And then the water curtain comes up again.
Okay.
And he confirms that he was the one behind that vision during times of conception and birth,
Oh.
which contradicts his earlier statement about always appearing physically the same, blonde hair, blue eyes.
Right.
He also states that Claudia's first grandchild, Brandon, is special to him and that he intended to transform him,
Special to him. What does that even mean?
which carries this concerning implication of ownership or control.
Yeah.
I mean, these additional claims really erode Ashtar's credibility, don't they?
Absolutely. The idea of increased implantation as a response to Claudia's help. The dismissal of his own title.
Right.
His changing appearance.
Yeah.
And the really possessive language regarding her grandchild.
Yeah.
I mean, it paints a picture of a being with hidden and not so benevolent motives.
Right. And perhaps the most disturbing part of the entire regression is this revelation about what caused her first grandchild's amniotic fluid issue.
Okay.
So it apparently wasn't a natural complication at all,
Okay.
but rather the result of a gray alien being sent by Ashtar to rupture the amniotic sac
Oh, wow.
and force an early birth.
That changes things.
This really goes against the idea of him being helpful or benevolent at all,
Right.
and all that apparent concern that Ashtar showed about the amniotic fluid issue.
Yeah.
It was allegedly a manipulation tactic to gain Claudia's trust and create a false sense of connection with her.
That's pretty messed up.
It's really disturbing, isn't it?
To intentionally cause a medical issue for a child and then use that to manipulate the grandmother,
Right.
that's a serious betrayal of trust.
It really is. And it underscores the deceptive tactics that Ashtar's portrayed as employing to gain influence and control.
Definitely. Okay, so what happens next?
So then the regression shifts to the removal of these alleged implants.
Okay.
So on Martin, they reportedly found chips in his right ear, which Claudia believes was causing his tinnitus and used for surveillance.
Okay.
And in his head, which she felt was preventing him from studying and concentrating, leading to depression and lowered energetic frequency.
Wow.
And they also found implants in his lower back or waist area, purpose unknown.
Okay.
His left knee, which is believed to be hindering his progress.
Okay.
And in his leg, again, purpose unknown.
Hmm.
For Claudia, they identified implants in her right ear, the back of her neck, which she said was the most painful,
Oh, no.
and in her genital area,
Wow.
specifically implants resembling ova in her right ovary and a metallic object in her uterus. The stated purpose of these genital implants was particularly disturbing,
What was
to facilitate what were described as ethereal pregnancies for Ashtar.
ethereal pregnancies for Ashtar?
Yeah, with the resulting humanoids allegedly being taken to Sirius
Wow.
to compensate for Ashtar's species' inability to reproduce,
That's wild.
which is causing her more painful periods and internal sensations.
Oh, God.
And the uterine implant was supposedly for controlling gestation periods to around 3 months.
So much detail. I
Yeah.
mean, it's striking the connections that are made between Martin's physical ailments
Right.
and these implant locations, and then similarly with Claudia's gynecological issues.
Well,
It creates this narrative that tries to explain these personal struggles.
right.
This idea of ethereal pregnancies and the harvesting of humanoids for Sirius is,
Yeah, it's bizarre.
it's unusual and unsettling.
Very unsettling. Okay, so the regression describes the removal process as being carried out by Ashtar himself.
Really?
Using hand movements and following this, both Claudia and Martin consciously reject Ashtar and his implants
Okay.
and firmly demand his departure.
So they take back their power.
Right.
That's good.
And just like that, the narrative says Ashtar and his secretary leave through a dimensional portal along with their UFO.
That was quick.
It was.
So this act of conscious rejection and demanding Ashtar to leave really highlights a moment of empowerment for Claudia and Martin.
Right.
And, this sudden departure through a dimensional portal is also something we see a lot in accounts of alleged extraterrestrial encounters.
Right. Okay, so immediately following the hypnosis session,
Okay.
Claudia reports experiencing clearer vision, greater sense of physical and spiritual well-being,
Okay.
and an overall feeling of lightness.
Wow.
She reiterates that she had absolutely no prior knowledge or interest in Ashtar Sheran before the regression,
That's interesting.
and she felt as though the information she received during hypnosis was being dictated to her.
Uh-huh.
Finally, both Claudia and Martin gave their consent for this session to be shared publicly.
Well, that's good of them.
Claudia's reported sensations of clarity and well-being after the hypnosis could be linked to a lot of factors, right?
Sure.
Like the hypnotic process itself,
Yeah.
the emotional release that might come with confronting these alleged experiences.
Right.
But her statement about having no prior knowledge of Ashtar Sheran, I mean, that's really intriguing.
Absolutely. It raises a lot of questions about, where did this information come from?
Right.
Was it her subconscious? Was it some external source or some combination of both?
Yeah. Well, this has been quite a journey.
It really has.
We've been down a deep, winding path this time.
A deep dive indeed.
Thank you for bringing this to us and for allowing us to take this deep dive into Claudia's extraordinary account.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So for you, our listeners, what aspects of Claudia's experience resonate most strongly? How does this account either challenge or perhaps confirm any of your own beliefs about UFOs, extraterrestrial contact, or the nature of spiritual guidance? What are the broader implications of the ideas that are presented here, like the potential for energetic manipulation and hidden agendas? These are big questions.
Yeah, I mean, this account really encourages us to think about the nature of subjective experiences. And to acknowledge the emotional and perceptual impact that they can have on individuals.
Absolutely.
And, it really prompts us to look at seemingly benevolent sources of information with a critical eye.
Right.
And to always be mindful of potential underlying motives,
Yeah.
regardless of their claimed origin.
Yeah, we definitely encourage you to explore these topics further. Maybe look into the study of hypnosis and consciousness, the power of belief systems, and the long history of channeled messages.
It's a fascinating area of inquiry.
It really is.
And ultimately, I think this deep dive shows us the importance of inner discernment and this ongoing personal quest for understanding truth through our own experiences and careful critical evaluation.
Well said.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time.
See you later.